More on what's actually going down right now in all of this polling. Let's bring in Sarah Bedford. She's an investigations editor for the Washington Examiner and joins us on the phone to discuss the state of this race. Hello, Sarah.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So how big was the debate in dictating the sentiment of the American voter?
I think it's overstating it a little to say that this is what made voters concerned about Joe Biden's fitness for office
Yes.
or worried about the economy. I mean, the fact of the matter is that Donald Trump was winning, albeit by a lot less in the polls before the debate. And so it's kind of ironic that Biden says the elites are trying to force him out. The elites were last to the party to notice that Joe Biden is too old to do this job and, hasn't actually done that well as president besides the age question.
Yes.
The debate, though, I think really cemented that for people who weren't necessarily paying attention before.
Yeah, the polling on Joe Biden's cognition and the way voters felt about him has been pretty clear, you're right, for a while. In fact, it formed the basis of James Rosen's question now over 2 years ago, directly to Joe Biden, about so many voters think that he is not of sound enough mind to be president of the United States. What does he say to them? So in other words, this question has been lingering for a very long time, except the media have, for the most part, not wanted to deal with it.
Right. I mean, the media and the Democrats who are now speaking out about hoping Joe Biden quickly demonstrates a more energetic candidate, I mean, they have been dismissive of the concerns of their constituents and their voters until the debate made this a problem they could no longer ignore. And now, like you mentioned, Josh Kreshower was saying before, you're headed into a situation where Donald Trump's path to 270 is completely clear, and potentially we're looking at an electoral college victory that could be well beyond what he was able to achieve in 2016.
I saw some claims today that even New York State is getting into the territory where it may be up for grabs, which is, if that's true, there's no chance this is anything but a Trump landslide come November. As you look at the national picture, how are the winds moving in Trump's direction right now?
Well, if you think about what a path to 270 needs to look like for Donald Trump, he has to obviously win all the states that he won in 2020. And then, the most plausible path from there, the conventional wisdom goes, would be for him to win Arizona and Georgia, both of which were very close in 2020. And in both of those states, he's pulled away significantly in polling. He's polling outside the margin of error above Joe Biden at this point. And if he does that, he only needs to win one state in the Midwest of the Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania. He can lose two of those at that point and still win the presidency, but he's pulling ahead in all three of those states. And even in some states that Republicans haven't dreamed of winning in a presidential in decades. So, when you put together those numbers, I mean, Joe Biden can't be down by more than, 4 or 5 points in every single swing state and have any kind of realistic expectation of reelection.
Yeah, and the left's operation to hustle for ballots and get them in early is one of the key ways that they try and take these things to get these elections over with. Early voting starting imminently in a bunch of states, and the left is under immense pressure right now to figure out who's going to be at the top of the ticket. When you look at this, how soon do they have to resolve who the nominee is going to be?
In just a matter of weeks. I mean, remember that Ohio has a ballot access deadline the first week of August, which means that even before the Democratic National Convention in Chicago, Democrats were going to have a virtual roll call to make sure that Joe Biden was formally nominated so that they could get him on the ballot in Ohio. And, there's been talk about having that virtual roll call even earlier than the first week of August, potentially in late July. Now we're in mid-July, you might say. So the time is really running out for Democrats who want to replace him. And I'm personally skeptical, and none of us can make a prediction. None of us have ever seen anything like this before, but personally skeptical that it's going to happen at this point, just because if there was going to be a moment to have that reckoning, it was when Democrats had maximum leverage right after that debate. I mean, barring any other unforeseen major debacles from Joe Biden, if he manages to string together passable interviews and appearances, I think that Democrats who haven't found their courage by now probably aren't going to.
I'm not even sure precisely what the strategy is for out of the White House. Clearly Biden wants to stay. And more so, it seems, the family members around him want him to stay. Jill and Hunter and his sister Valerie, they're all reportedly pushing really hard to keep him in place. They keep doing public events with him every so often, and those tend to be nothing more than sustainers for the Democrat panic that we're seeing, Sarah. We're getting a press conference tomorrow, Thursday, with Joe Biden in front of a press that has suddenly turned hostile as they look to replace him. And then on Monday, it was just announced he's supposed to get a Lester Holt primetime interview on NBC, where he's once again, just as the Republican convention is starting, going to be doing a public exposition of his ability to speak. What is the strategy as you understand it?
Well, those have to go well, right? The stakes for every single public appearance, even just walking from the motorcade to the Air Force One, is enormous for Joe Biden right now. I think the strategy for the White House is to have these events where Joe Biden pulls out a decent performance, and it can kind of be demonstrated that, he's fine for now. I think the press conference will be the most interesting to watch, just because even though this is the White House that pre-selects the reporters they're going to call on, and we've seen that before, even pre-screens the questions, and in this sort of bilateral format with foreign leaders that we see normally keeps the press conferences pretty short, the level of control that the White House exerts over the press conference, which doesn't normally get mentioned by the mainstream media reporters who benefit from that, I think will come under a lot of scrutiny as well. Because so far, all we've seen after the debate is highly scripted, highly controlled events to try to prove that Joe Biden is with it. And that's not enough for normal voters. Maybe it's enough to calm Democrats. It's not enough for normal voters.
No. And the most infamous example in the wake of that debate was that radio host in Philadelphia who accepted scripted questions from the White House, turns around, asks them of Joe Biden. Joe Biden is incapable of even answering them coherently, suggesting at one point that he was the first black woman to work for a black president. And she got fired. She got fired as the station became embarrassed by the way the interview was set up and the way she conducted herself by asking the questions the White House wrote for her.
That's right. And I mean, in the George Stephanopoulos interview, which one could argue didn't go super well for Joe Biden, George Stephanopoulos kind of asked the same question over and over again for 22 minutes. Are you going to step down? And if not, why not? And he just rephrased it 15 different ways for Joe Biden.
Yeah.
And so, he hasn't really faced those harsh questions or those unscripted moments since the debate. And it seems like the White House is trying to keep all of his appearances as low risk as possible.
Right. Now, that's to convince voters. Meanwhile, elected Democrats have been well aware of this problem for a while. In fact, as we look at the numbers for the House and the Senate, you're seeing Nancy Pelosi. If anything's an indication of how this is going, it's Nancy Pelosi going on TV saying, "Well, it's up to Joe," even though Joe said at the beginning of the week he's staying in the race. What does that tell you about the down ballot impact of all of this? What is likely to happen to both the House and the Senate this year at this rate?
At this rate, I mean, some of the candidates in the Senate candidates in swing states or even in red states like Montana and Ohio were outpolling Joe Biden, which suggests Democrats don't have a Democrat problem. They have a Joe Biden problem, right? But there's no, the drag that a Joe Biden loss of the magnitude that the polls are suggesting right now, there's no candidate that will be able to overcome a drag that big. And so I think you will start to see a lot of if Joe Biden stays, you'll start to see a lot of the big money probably shift towards those down ballot races to try to staunch some of the bleeding. But the map is being expanded for Republicans because of this opportunity in some pretty crazy ways. I mean, Maryland, the Senate race, is pretty looking good for Republicans right now. Those are the sorts of pickups that you would see if the Donald Trump victory is that big, and he will definitely have some coattails in that case.
I saw Ed Morrissey over at Hot Air right this week, and I'm going to talk to David Strom here in a few minutes too. But one of the things he pointed out is, Biden is now insisting, and he insisted in that Morning Joe interview on Monday, Sarah Bedford, that, hey, he's here, and if you don't like it, tough, try and run against me. I'm not going anywhere. And Ed Morrissey is saying Biden is running basically at this point on a on a program of mutually assured destruction. If Democrats are going to keep carping about Joe Biden being at the top of the ticket, they're all going to go down together. So Biden is essentially threatening his own party with, I'm staying, so either shut up or we're all going to lose together.
I've seen it described as Trumpian, this attitude that Joe Biden has, and it just exposes the lie at the heart of so much of the Democratic messaging about Donald Trump. Because if you want to talk about, fealty to one man, look at the fact that only 8 Democrats in the House have come out and publicly called for Joe Biden to step down when he's manifestly not fit to hold office. You saw far more Republicans come out and demand Donald Trump step off the ticket when it was later in the game and more costly in 2016 after the Access Hollywood tape. And Joe Biden has kind of built his own cult of personality up as the savior of the Democratic Party the way Trump does. And the anti-democratic message at the heart of get over it, this is a person in power, I think really undercuts the savior of democracy message that Joe Biden was pushing.
Yeah, it really is amazing to watch. Let's see. Sarah Bedford, thank you as always from the Washington Examiner. Really good to have you with us today.